Taking into consideration that not every area is the same, do you think this could work in all areas? This kind of like volunteer
Well,
community-run libraries.
I have a feeling that depending on the way in which ours turns out, more people will be looking at us and saying, well, maybe that's the way we want to go. If, on the other hand, it doesn't work, then they'll be saying, well, that's something we're not going to try. But I think it's I think it's worth trying.
I mean, you get some areas which are mostly made up of people who work long hours. I guess that in a community like that, it's going to be much more difficult to run a community-run library system.
I don't know that I would agree with you. I mean, I think what it is that there is, in most communities now, really quite there's a lot of people who really would like to become involved. There just hasn't been the opportunities. I mean, if you look at the way in which, for instance, parish councils are going, parish councils are now being given the opportunity, or so I heard the other day, are about to be given the opportunity to become more in charge of what they want to see within their communities. They should be able to have a little more input into, for instance, planning applications and what they want to see in their own particular area. They, after all, are the people who know the local area best. Somebody sitting in an office in Whitehall has very little idea of what goes on in Bishop's Lydeard, so why on earth should they start making decisions about what goes on here?
You're tuned into Summer Valley 97.5 FM, and in this programme we're looking at the current state of libraries. Another thing that I asked in the interviews was how libraries can adapt in the future. Firstly, I put this question towards Lauren Smith, and she brought up a few interesting ways of how libraries have adapted and survived despite funding cuts. Do you know of any ways that libraries can adapt in these tough times?
Yeah, there are a lot of quite innovative ways that councils have been trying to save libraries and trying to avoid spending money, cutting money from library services. So things like sponsorship. York, for example, their new central library was sponsored by Aviva, which, has its own implications. Why is a bank wanting to piggyback off the goodwill of a civic resource? And it may well be that they want to improve their profile, but it benefits the community, it benefits the library service. So I think that's something that councils should be looking into.
So you think philanthropy is the way forward for libraries?
I think libraries are rooted a lot in philanthropy. I mean, Carnegie, who opened hundreds of libraries in the UK and other parts of the world, was a great philanthropist. Again, I don't see that as something that's sustainable.
I then asked John Smeaton about what he thinks about philanthropy and public donations and how this will feature in the community-run libraries. So are you going to be open to kind of philanthropy, donations from the public, etc.?
We are going. The system we're going to use is that we will do some fundraising, rather like village halls do and the rest of them. But on top of that, we're also going to be asking the local parish council for an amount of money. In fact, there are 3 or 4 local parish councils that will be involved because they will all be able to use that library. And on top of that, we intend to have a membership fee, a very small one, but nevertheless a membership fee to help us keep track of who is borrowing books, but also to raise a certain amount of ongoing income.
I asked Kristen Lawrence what she thought about libraries which use public as well as private funding. I found out a lot about some libraries have actually had a mixture of public and private funding. What do you think of those?
Every library will work in its own particular way, and we'll do our best to support them whichever way they want to do it. I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong way. It's whatever suits that community best.
I asked June Wetland how she thought Baines Library has adapted recently, despite the fact that information is much more accessible to people with the advent of the internet.
As I say, that the libraries do have computers in them, and I think to some extent, I mean, one section of the population that I think all libraries like to encourage in really are young people, because if you get children and young people in, then they'll tend to come back to the library at other stages of their lives. I think often library users use the library as children and then maybe don't use them a bit later on and then come back again. So people sort of dip in and out of libraries sometimes, even if they don't use them for their whole lives. So I think, having computers in libraries is really important. That gets a lot of young people into libraries, I think, that maybe don't have the access that they'd like at home to computers. And again, tied in with sort of information and the internet, one of the things that we've often provided in libraries is computer training for elderly people, the sort of Silver Surfer type courses, so that libraries are actually providing access to information by training people that are kind of quite frightened of using computers. Because I think, computers, when we tend to think of people using computers, I think we tend to think perhaps disproportionately of them being younger people. But I mean, I think that internet use is absolutely fantastic for elderly people because they can shop online and gain information without maybe needing to go out when they're even more elderly and can't get out of the house very easily and things. So I think that's a really useful thing.